Welcome to the Soulstem Podcast, where we explore healing at the intersection of mind, body, and spirit. I'm Topher Scott, a licensed professional counselor associate, supervised by Leslie Smith, LPCS, in the state of Texas.
And I'm Dr. Kenny Mittelstadt, a functional medicine practitioner and acupuncturist trained in systems-based root cause care. On this show, we go beyond the quick fixes and into the deeper layers of healing through the lenses of counseling, mental health, and functional medicine.
That's right. We're here for the seekers, for those of you who've felt dismissed, pathologized, or wondering if the system missed the point entirely. If that's you, hear this. You're not broken and you're not alone.
This show is our way of offering something different, a conversation that starts from within, and one that invites you to listen differently to your body, to your story, and to your intuition. So, Topher, I'd love to start by asking, was there a moment in your own life when you began to believe something was wrong with you, especially through the lens and the current paradigm and the world and what it told you?
There were a few times, a lot of threads there, but I would say one of the clearest starting points for me was around the age 10. I went through some pretty intensive traumatic experiences that really shook my nervous system. And of course, I say that now. I didn't really have that language then, and I didn't really understand what was happening in my body. And I didn't have an opportunity to really process it or have counseling around it. I grew up in a home that was of the, you gotta push through it sort of mentality. Don't look back, don't worry about it. Through my teens, I started to develop obsessive compulsive thought patterns and some depressive symptoms as well, fatigue and apathy, anhedonia, loss of interest and pleasure in a lot of things. I really kind of barely made it through high school at the end, especially my senior year. I just was totally checked out because I was so depressed and over it. Oftentimes, what I experienced from family and providers was just total dismissal and minimization. Some told me there's just nothing wrong with you, you're just being lazy, or it's just in your head. No one along the way really asked me why I was feeling what I was feeling or what had happened in my story to bring on this sort of outcome. At a certain point, I was prescribed Paxil, an antidepressant, and that just made me feel awful. It was terrible. I couldn't sleep. I felt really inflamed in my body. I just couldn't really tolerate it. And it wasn't until my 20s that I began exploring these things through a completely different lens, one that separated me from the problem. And I think that shift is really essential in healing and especially essential in therapy. Too often, clinicians are trained to observe, diagnose, and tame symptoms, but not necessarily get us curious about what those symptoms are really trying to say and why they show up in the first place. Take anxiety, for example. Instead of just challenging the thought, we can ask, why is this showing up now? What changed in your system, in your environment, in your relationships? What is making you feel unsafe? That exploration makes all the difference. I'm curious about your journey, Kenny. When did you start to feel like the conventional model wasn't telling the full story for you?
Yeah, for me, there were some similar patterns there. Definitely a lot that was stifled and shut down in my earlier years. And for me, it really hit in my early 20s. I was struggling with chronic acid reflux to the point where water would bother it. I was about 40 pounds overweight, incredibly fatigued. I wasn't sleeping through the night, and it was really affecting my quality of life and my ability to show up in my friendships, in my music performance career at the time. And no one was connecting the dots. I was being treated in fragments. Get on this PPI for X amount of time, or potentially indefinitely to help manage your symptoms, or an antidepressant, which made the weight gain even worse, and a tranquilizer for insomnia, which was happening every night. It wasn't until someone finally looked at me as an entire connected, integrated person They gave equal attention to my environment, my emotions, and how it was ultimately affecting my function, my physiology. That's when things shifted for me personally. I realized that my lifestyle was not aligning with my well-being. I was closeted. There was a lot to explore in that department in my life. There were layers of religious trauma there. And ultimately, I was very unhappy, overwhelmed, and totally disconnected from my body. And of course, it was manifesting in symptoms. My symptoms were signals of my body just saying enough is enough. And that experience transformed how I saw healing personally. And it led me down this pathway where I find myself in the functional medicine space and getting my training in acupuncture and chiropractic because I wanted to become the kind of practitioner who actually listens, who is there for me, and who sees people as more than just symptoms, as these labels, as these walking sack of potatoes of diagnoses. And that's what really lit the fire and my passion, and it's still what drives me today.
Yeah, I relate to that deeply. My path to counseling wasn't linear. I've only become a counselor very recently, just completing my education and internship and now in private practice. But it came at the right time in my life with the right awarenesses. And I don't think I could have become this person without those experiences. So I have a lot of gratitude, even though there was pain there. And one thing I've always held is that I just want to be the kind of counselor that I never had. I want to offer the kind of care that sees people as full humans, not just a diagnosis on a clipboard.
I love that. It's so important. We're not these broken people walking around. This is the human experience, and that involves some pain. Every time someone gets labeled, whether it's anxiety or IBS or depression, it can feel like a dead end, like there's no hope for anything beyond that. And it gets really heavy when we're carrying around these diagnoses that stack up on each other. What if we saw diagnoses as snapshots in time, not as life sentences, but invitations to start asking some deeper questions?
Yeah, exactly. I think diagnosis is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can validate when someone is feeling a certain way, but it can also pathologize and limit how we see ourselves, especially if we over identify with the diagnosis and make it part of our identity. The DSM, the manual we use in mental health, is constantly evolving. These diagnoses, especially around mental health, are not set in stone. They reflect culture, context, politics, and these are the viewpoints of the powers that be, because there are authors and creators behind that manual. So we have to ask, what are these diagnoses actually for? And what's this deeper story behind the symptom? I think it's really helpful to reframe symptoms as signals, because we can think of that from the body, from our environment, from our relationships. And then we can start to see them not as a problem to fix, but as wisdom to listen to. And how do we shift into better alignment?
Beautifully said. I love that word listening in regards to the way symptoms appear. Listen to them. They are these signals. And yes, I really appreciated what you said too, that it can validate an experience when we can finally name something. But that's just the first step in the journey of then dealing with that something. And that shift is really everything. In functional medicine, we look for the why behind the symptoms. The diagnosis or the symptom itself is the what. Take blood sugar issues, for example. Those imbalances can be building underneath the surface for years, sometimes even decades before they show up on the conventional labs that are designed to detect them. And by the time it shows up as diabetes or metabolic syndrome, the roots have been running deeply for some time. But if we can catch the signs early with advanced lab testing, fatigues, cravings, mood swings, energy peaks and valleys, we can intervene in totally different ways. It's not about running away from and suppressing the symptoms. It's about supporting the systems underneath that are creating those symptoms.
Yeah, that resonates in mental health too, especially for me. If I can offer a little bit of critique about mental health and its history, historically, it's focused a lot on cognition. It kind of plays cognition front and center. And we would see that through the lens of cognitive behavioral therapy, which, by the way, is highly efficacious and does work for a lot of people. And I think it has its place as an intervention. It just doesn't necessarily address everything. It's great for challenging irrational thoughts, but the body is sort of left out of the conversation. And I think that's really changing now and has been changing for a while. We have frameworks like internal family systems and polyvagal theory that are reshaping the landscape of how we approach counseling. IFS teaches us that we are made of parts, inner voices, emotions, and thoughts, and we can see those as subpersonalities. These inner voices are protectors, and they are all serving a special and functional purpose. None are bad. I'm going to say that again. None are bad. Even the ones that feel chaotic and destructive or create pain, they are also trying to protect us. When we reframe that way, it starts to build on self-compassion because suddenly we're not fighting against ourselves. And another approach is polyvagal theory. And it reminds us that our nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of safety. We are really a nervous system first, housed in this flesh bag, and it helps us understand that the physiological roots of things like shutdown, anxiety, or disconnection, and reactions, these aren't flaws. These are adaptive responses.
Exactly. That's a huge focus in the functional medicine world too, that safety cues and how that sets the tone for everything downstream, from our immune resilience to our stress resilience to blood sugar balance. It affects literally every system. We're starting to see a major shift in the way that we analyze this language of pathology. People are waking up to the fact that the quick fix model just doesn't work, especially for those chronic, complex illnesses. We've grown up in this paradigm of the discovery of antibiotics, and the quick fix works there. It does kill the bacteria quickly in a very predictable way. But when we're talking about the intricate detail that goes on in our chemistry, that's not getting as much weight in the conventional paradigm. We're still trying to develop drugs to turn off entire systems versus challenging what's going on with the language. It's slowly stripping people of their power, of their sense of autonomy, and really contributing to that tone of brokenness. So when we can make that shift, that's where the long-term transformation begins and gives us our footing.
I totally agree. And a big part of that transformation is unlearning. Unlearning, especially in our country, that wellness is something that is just going to quickly happen to us when we pull the right lever or we take the right pill. And remembering that it's something that we can co-create with the right support, the right tools, and patience. Reframing it to think of it as a journey. That quick fix mindset is everywhere. It's baked into the system, from the 7-minute doctor visits to the drug ads on TV, which, by the way, the United States is one of the few countries that actually allows pharmaceutical companies to create advertisements for television. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but I'm just going to say real healing asks us to slow down, listen in, and take one step at a time.
I could not agree more. And I feel like so many people have trouble slowing down because of this paradigm that we have created, this machine, this matrix. Even in acupuncture, I'd see clients coming in hoping that I could fix them, the quote unquote fix them in a session or two. But healing is not passive. And that's something that really drove me into the functional medicine space more and more. I didn't want to just be viewed as a technician doing something to my patients. I wanted to flip that and be their partner and their co-creator, like you said, in the healing process, because it's so much more than this passive experience. It's something that we do with intention over time. That's why I now focus so much on the lifestyle foundations: sleep, stress, movement, nourishment. The list goes on in the ways we can profoundly reshape our lives and our orientation to healing. It's about the baby steps. It's not in the pills, not even in the supplements themselves. I view supplements as the materials, but the lifestyle factors are the cues. They're the signals to use those materials to build and to promote healing with our highly intuitive internal systems. It all starts with the daily choices we make.
Totally. I've seen the same thing happen in counseling practice, especially around hypnosis. People might come in thinking, if I can just reprogram my mind or have someone reprogram my mind, then everything will shift. What I notice in that and what I understand about hypnosis is that it's a little bit more complicated. We can use it as an intervention, like any other therapeutic intervention, but it still requires work. We can't really escape the work. And we still have to meet those deeper needs, and we still have to practice. We have to repeat and commit. And that's the essence of healing. It's not a magic wand, it's repetition, integration, and compassion. And yes, looking at all of the different domains of life, as you pointed out, to just look at it through one lens is not enough. We're so much more complicated. Our lives are so much more complex. We need to be looking at where the stressors come from in all directions and start to address that as well. Because if we don't change those circumstances, nothing's going to change in a permanent or sustainable way. And yes, we can use powerful tools like hypnosis, acupuncture, or other forms of therapy. And that can be helpful. But again, they work best when the client is very engaged in that process.
When they feel that they're a part of this journey, and in fact, it is their own journey. We are just facilitators of that journey in a way, or guides, if you will. Healing is not a destination. It's something that I'm still working on constantly and consistently. And I would argue that it's a lifelong process. It's an ongoing relationship with ourselves and a conversation with ourselves. And it's recruiting tools that strategically help us get there, whether we find those in things like therapy or functional medicine interventions or a supportive community. These things all have power to influence our chemistry and our physical expression of health as much as our internal perception of health. And it's the constant ongoing maintenance. It's the curiosity. It's the countercultural thinking that it takes to really get there, because we do live in a society that rewards speed, rewards the shortcuts, and slowly disconnecting from ourselves. And that's a huge part of, again, what inspires me to do this work is slowly returning that sense of autonomy, that sense of power back to the patient. The more we slow down and the more we tune in, the more healing really does become possible.
I totally agree. And something you said in there about healing being countercultural, that brings me to something I think we're going to end up talking a lot more about through the course of other episodes in this podcast. Healing as a political act, because they say therapy is political, and it is. I mean, part of our ethics is to challenge the systems that block empowerment and autonomy for clients. Well, let's be real. Systems aren't neutral. The dominant culture has a perspective of healing that for many people isn't working. And so, as you said, it's stepping out of that matrix and understanding that that system is shaped by power, money, history, capitalism, colonialism. And when we advocate for healing that honors the whole person, we're also challenging the system that has historically pathologized or neglected that humanity.
Ugh, I just love the way that you phrased all of that. That honesty and looking at the systems and the whole conversation, it's one that I really can't wait to dive into deeper. How healing is systemic, how it's contagious, how it's personal, it's spiritual, but it's also deeply political. And I know we're seeing some huge shifts today, and I know we'll continue to see more. I can't wait to be a part of that conversation.
Yep. It's complex. It's never just one thing. And healing lives in that intersection between mind, body, spirit, community. And I think that's the lens we're bringing to this Soulstem podcast. And I just want to say thank you to our listeners for being with us today. We are honored to be a part of your healing journey.
We truly are. Thank you for tuning in. And in the next episode, we're looking at the systems that shaped medicine and mental health, where they came from, where they fall short, and where we believe we're headed.
And until then, be kind to your body, be gentle with your story, and remember, you're not broken, you are brilliantly adaptive.
For a fresh dose of science and soul, be sure to follow and subscribe.
Find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Spotify. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.